My boss laughed when I quit and said I'd never find anything better. 3 weeks later, he saw the company I just got hired at announce me as their new VP, and his face went completely pale right there in the middle of the office. I was standing in the glass conference room on the 27th floor of downtown Cleveland, watching my boss, Douglas Reddington, laugh in my face like he'd been waiting years for this moment. "You really think you can walk away from this?" he said, leaning back in his leather chair, smug as hell. "You'll never find anything better, Mara, not with your background, not with your limitations." His words hit like a slap I'd already been bracing for. I kept my expression still, even though my pulse was thudding in my ears. My resignation letter sat on the table between us, crisp and clean, like a dare. 3 years of building entire strategies from scratch. 3 years of him taking credit for work he barely understood. 3 years of swallowing things just to stay afloat. And now this. I forced a smile. "I appreciate everything, Douglas." He smirked harder. He always smirked hardest when he thought he'd broken someone. "I'm serious. You're nothing without this company. Who else is going to hire someone with your improvable skill set? You should be thanking me for letting you stay as long as I did." I kept breathing. Slow, controlled. Because if I let myself react, I'd say things I couldn't take back, and I needed him to underestimate me, just a little longer. He tapped a gold pen against my letter. "Funny timing, though. The European expansion project kicks off next quarter. You know, the one I told you weren't ready for. Turns out we're handing it to someone with vision." My stomach twisted, but not for the reason he believed. Because I had spent the last 4 months secretly meeting with someone who made that expansion project look like child's play. Someone Douglas didn't know I had access to. Someone whose name made grown executives stop talking. And if Douglas had known what I had been offered 2 days earlier, he would have choked on his arrogance. He was still talking. "Don't worry. When you come crawling back, maybe we'll have an assistant role open, something more aligned with your abilities." I looked him dead in the eyes. "I won't be crawling back." He waved me away like I'd already vanished. "We'll see." I turned to leave, gripping my box of things so tightly my fingers went numb. Outside the conference room, the office buzzed with its normal Friday chaos. Keyboards clacking, phones ringing, people pretending they weren't watching me walk out for the last time. But halfway to the elevator, someone stepped directly into my path. Not someone from the company. Someone who could not have been there. A woman in a charcoal coat, dark hair twisted into a sharp knot, eyes cold enough to slow my steps. Dr. Sabine Kessler, the industry legend who had vanished 10 years earlier after a scandal nobody ever fully understood. She shouldn't have known me. She shouldn't have been anywhere near this building. But she smiled like she'd been waiting for this exact moment. "Miss Rowan," she said, my last name slicing out of her mouth with surgical precision. "We need to talk." My breath caught. "What are you doing here?" "Your former employer," she said softly, glancing toward Douglas's office, "has made a very serious mistake, and I'm here to make sure you don't repeat mine." "What mistake?" I whispered. She leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper that felt like a warning and a promise at the same time. "Douglas Reddington isn't just stealing your work," she murmured. "He's using it for something far more dangerous. Something he thinks you'll never discover." My heart slammed against my ribs, because there was no way she could have known about, but she did. She absolutely did. Sabine straightened, her expression unreadable. "Come with me, Mara," she said. "You're running out of time." And then she added one more sentence. A sentence that changed everything I thought I knew about my job, my future, and the man who had just laughed in my face. "I know what he did to your proposals," she whispered. "All of them," she paused, "and I know why." The elevator doors closed behind us with a soft hiss, but my mind was still spinning from the fact that Dr. Sabine Kessler, the ghost of my industry, had just appeared out of nowhere and said Douglas was using my work for something far more dangerous. I followed her out of instinct, adrenaline, and the small part of me that had always suspected there was more going on than bad management and stolen credit. We stepped into the parking garage. The air was cold, echoing, and smelled faintly like oil and concrete dust. "Before we go any further," Sabine said, "I need to know what Douglas told you about your proposals." "Nothing," I said. "He rejected every one. Said they were too ambitious or misaligned with the company's vision." Her expression tightened like she'd heard those words before, and I realized maybe she had. You said he's using my work, I managed. How? He never implemented any of it. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she gestured toward a quiet corner of the garage and leaned against a pillar, studying me with the sharp, assessing eyes of someone who never asked a question she didn't already know the answer to. Start from the beginning, Mara, she said. Tell me everything. So I did. I told her how I'd grown up in a small suburb outside Toledo, raised by a mom who taught high school English and a dad who worked night shifts at a distribution center. We never had much money, but I had libraries and curiosity, and the kind of stubbornness that sometimes passed for talent. I told her how I clawed my way into a mid-tier state college on scholarships and sheer panic, how I graduated at the top of my business analytics program with 2 internships and a portfolio full of strategic planning case studies. Most people got hired into Redline Systems. The company Douglas ran like a fiefdom through connections, family friends, alumni networks, country club whispers. I got in because I solved a logistics model during the interview that 3 other candidates couldn't crack. For the first year, I kept my head down, worked late, volunteered for anything, learned things nobody bothered teaching. By year 2, people started coming to me quietly. Can you look at this data? Do you think we should restructure the rollout this way? Does this add up, or am I losing my mind? But every time I submitted a proposal of my own, Douglas shot it down. Every single one. At first, I assumed he genuinely didn't see the value. Then I thought maybe someone above him was blocking it. But then small things started happening, things that didn't make sense. A prototype I'd drafted showing massive efficiency improvements suddenly disappeared from the shared drive. Yet Douglas had mysteriously suggested nearly the same model during an executive meeting. A timeline optimization framework I'd built was sent back to me marked too theoretical, only for Douglas to use the exact phrasing from my notes in a pitch deck to a partner company. Even worse, 2 of my proposals, detailed, refined, polished, never even made it to the board. He told me they weren't ready. But a coworker accidentally CC'd me on an email proving he'd never forwarded them at all. I started keeping copies of everything. Versions, logs, time-stamped notes, but I kept quiet. Because I was 28, outnumbered and tired. Because speaking up in a place like Redline wasn't brave, it was suicidal. Still, I kept working, kept submitting, kept hoping that maybe the next one would be too good to bury. And then, Sabine asked quietly. And then I got noticed, I said, but not by Douglas. By someone outside the company. Someone who had seen me at an industry workshop, asked a few questions, and followed up with an invitation. Dr. Vieira Wilson, I said. But the minute I said that name, Sabine's expression changed. Not surprised, not annoyed, something else, something like recognition. You've been meeting with Vieira, she said, voice tight. Yes. For months. Sabine exhaled slowly, like a puzzle piece had just snapped into place. I knew it, she murmured. This is worse than I thought. My stomach dropped. What are you talking about? She straightened, jaw clenched. Mara, Douglas didn't bury your proposals because he thought they were bad. She paused. He buried them because he was selling them. A cold rush went through me. Selling? To who? I whispered. She met my eyes. The same people who destroyed my career. For a second, the garage felt colder than it should have. My breath actually hitched. Selling them? I repeated. Douglas has been selling my proposals. To who? Sabine's jaw flexed once before she answered. To a private consultancy called Stratagem Core. They operate behind the scenes in our industry. No public presence, no official partnerships, no identifiable leadership. They buy intellectual property from inside companies, gut the ideas down to the bones, then resell them to the highest bidder. That's illegal, I whispered. It's more common than you think, Sabine said. And Douglas has been on their payroll for years. He didn't bury your proposals because they weren't good. He buried them because your ideas were too good, worth something, and you were naive enough to trust the system. Something inside my chest twisted tight, rage blooming under my ribs in a way that didn't feel like me. How do you know all this? She gave a grim, humorless laugh. Because it happened to me, 10 years ago, different department, same company, same pattern. The way she said it made something click, something awful. You used to work at Redline, I said. Sabine nodded once. Lead strategist. I built 3 innovation models that were stolen, sold, and packaged under fake development teams. When I confronted my director, they pinned a confidentiality violation on me. Redline destroyed my reputation in under a month, packaged me as unstable, unprofessional, a risk to corporate security. I could have fought it, but Stratagem Corps buried me in legal threats. After that, I disappeared. My stomach flipped. I remembered vague rumors during my first month at Redline, something about a strategist who had gone rogue. I never heard her name, but the tone people used made it clear she was someone to avoid mentioning around leadership. Sabine was that ghost. And now Douglas is doing it to you, she said quietly. Except this time, he got greedy. He didn't expect someone like Vieira to notice you. And he definitely didn't expect Vieira to recruit you. I blinked hard, trying to steady my thoughts. So Douglas stole my work, sold it to this stratagem group, and now what? They're reselling it while pretending I never existed. Sabine hesitated. Not exactly. They're doing something worse. She looked at me like she wasn't sure how much to reveal. Your proposals, especially the predictive allocation model and the phased deployment sequence, were too advanced. Stratagem's team couldn't replicate them. They thought Douglas was intentionally withholding the rest. But he wasn't, I said. No, Sabine said, because he didn't understand your work. He only skimmed what you gave him. That's why they're angry. Cold dread slid down my spine. Angry at who? At you, Mara. Sabine's voice softened, almost apologetic. They think you're deliberately hiding something they already paid for. My mouth went dry. I didn't know any of this existed. They don't care. I stepped back a little, my palms going sweaty. Why would Douglas put me in that kind of danger? Sabine lifted an eyebrow. Because people like him don't see consequences, just profit. And if something blew back on you, he'd say you went rogue, that you acted alone, that he tried to stop you. It felt like the floor shifted under me. I thought Douglas had just been a credit-stealing narcissist, but this was more calculated, more predatory, more organized. What do they want from me? I asked, barely getting the words out. Sabine looked toward the exit ramp of the garage, scanning the shadows like she expected someone to step out. They want access to everything you haven't given them yet, she said. And Douglas told them he could get it. My heart hammered against my ribs. Why are you telling me this? I whispered. Sabine stepped closer, lowering her voice. Because they made the same promise to Douglas that they made to my old director. A cut of the profits, protection, a bigger role, but it's all lies. She leaned in, her gaze hard as steel. Stratagem Corps doesn't leave loose ends, and after what happened 10 years ago, I'm not letting them create another one. She paused, letting the weight settle. You need to understand something, Mara, she said. This isn't about your proposals anymore. My breath caught. It's about why your proposals stood out to them. She watched my expression change, and that was when she said the words that made my stomach drop clean out of my body. They think someone taught you, she whispered. Someone who used to work for them, someone they've been hunting for years. I stared at her, confused. Who? Sabine's eyes softened in a way that terrified me more than anything else so far. Your mentor, she said quietly. Vieira Wilson. For a moment, the sound of cars rolling through the garage blurred into white noise. I couldn't tell if I was breathing too fast or not at all. My mentor, I managed. Vieira. She's not connected to any of this. Sabine didn't argue. She just watched me with the awful calm of someone who'd already lived through the truth. Stratagem Corps believes she is, she said. And they believe you're her new proxy. That's impossible, I snapped. Vieira has been nothing but careful, Sabine cut in. Mysterious, brilliant, selective, her expression tightened. That's exactly how she used to be with them. My pulse kicked into overdrive. Used to be. Sabine pulled out her phone, tapping something. Then she handed it to me. On the screen was an article, grainy, archived, barely readable. A decade old. Strategic Innovation Director Sabine Kessler resigns amid internal dispute. And beneath it, a related link. Consultant Vieira Wilson withdraws from major project. Analysts speculate internal conflict. My blood ran cold. What happened between you and Vieira? I asked. Sabine's jaw tightened, but she answered. We were part of the same team. She was the visionary, I was the structure. We both worked with Stratagem Corps before we knew what they really were. Vieira figured it out first. She tried to pull out. Sabine swallowed hard. They retaliated. They destroyed her reputation quietly, then came after mine publicly to send a message. I shook my head instinctively. No, Vieira told me she stepped back to look for talent. She lied, Sabine said flatly, because she didn't want you to know they were still watching her. Something inside me cracked, just a little. My meetings with Vieira replayed in my mind like flashbulbs, her studying me a little too closely, asking which files Douglas had access to, asking if anyone at the company had noticed changes in my work, her insistence on confidentiality, her warning not to store our notes anywhere online. All the little things I'd brushed off as quirks of a reclusive genius. I felt like I had stepped into someone else's life without permission. She wasn't protecting you from Douglas, Sabine said. She was hiding you from Stratagem Corps. I backed up a step. Why me? I'm nobody. No, Mara, Sabine's voice lowered. You're exactly the kind of person they scout. Talented, undervalued, overworked, hungry. You produce more than your job title suggests, and you don't have anyone powerful backing you. That makes you valuable and disposable. My chest tightened painfully. Why didn't Vieira warn me? Sabine hesitated. And that hesitation told me the worst part was still coming. Mara, she said softly, I need you to listen to me very carefully now. I swallowed. Stratagem Corps doesn't think you're just Vieira's protege. She stepped closer, lowering her voice until it echoed in the cold concrete space like a secret too heavy to hold. They think you're her replacement. But I'm not, I said. I didn't take her place in anything, she shook her head. You don't understand. When Vieira disappeared from the industry, they assumed she was gone for good. But then suddenly, out of nowhere, new proposals start appearing in the system, proposals with her fingerprints all over them. My stomach turned violently. No, I whispered. Those were mine. I know, Sabine said. But they don't believe that. I stared at her, shaking my head slowly. They think she gave you everything. They think your work is hers, repackaged. They think you're the conduit she's been using to get her ideas back into the world without being traced. That's insane, I said. She didn't give me anything. She challenged me, sure, but the ideas were mine. Sabine looked at me with something like pity. That's exactly why they want you, she said, because you're better than Vieira. The garage suddenly felt too quiet, too empty. My heart hammered so hard it hurt. Why are you telling me this? I whispered. Sabine took a long breath. Because Stratagem Corps sent someone to Cleveland 3 days ago, she said. And Douglas promised them access to you, to your work, to everything. My mouth went dry. She stepped even closer. And because this morning Stratagem Corps officially severed ties with Douglas. I blinked. What does that mean? Sabine's expression was grim. It means they don't need him anymore. She paused. It means they're coming for you next. For a long moment, I just stood there staring at Sabine, my whole body buzzing with a kind of cold panic that didn't feel real yet. Like my brain was trying to understand something it didn't have the tools for. They're coming for me, I repeated quietly, as if saying it again would somehow make it fit into the world I knew. Why? I don't even know them. I didn't sell anything. I didn't even know anything was being sold. That doesn't matter, Sabine said. Stratagem Corps doesn't operate on truth, they operate on leverage. If they think you have something they want, or something they can use, you become an asset, or a liability. My hands trembled. I shoved them into my coat pockets so she wouldn't see. What do they want from me? My notes. My drafts, Sabine shook her head. They want whatever they think Vieira gave you. They want her mind. They think it's living inside you now. That's insane, I snapped. It doesn't matter, Sabine said again. What matters is that they believe it. I leaned against a cold column, feeling the concrete through my jacket, trying to steady myself. So what do we do? There was no hesitation in her answer. You prepare, she said. We're going to build a wall between you and them so high that even Stratagem Corps won't be able to breach it. I blinked. Yes, she said simply, because I couldn't save myself 10 years ago. But I can save you. I didn't know what to say to that. Gratitude wasn't big enough. Fear wasn't complete enough. So what's the first step? I asked. Information, she said. We need to know exactly what Douglas handed over. Files, timestamps, metadata, every scrap they bought or think they bought. If he sold incomplete models, they'll assume you're hiding the rest. We need to prove what's yours, what's missing, and what he manipulated. A thought hit me so hard I actually gasped. My external drive, I said. I kept every proposal, every draft, every version, all time-stamped, including the ones he buried. Sabine nodded sharply. Good, that's step 1, I swallowed. And step 2, her expression darkened. We need to understand why Stratagem Core thinks Vieira is back in the game. Because they're not wrong about one thing, you didn't get those ideas from her. But she chose you. That part isn't an accident. Something in my chest twisted. I remembered her intense eyes, her careful questions, the way she always seemed to push me just hard enough to see where I'd break, then step back like she was mapping my limits. "Are you saying Vieira set me up?" I whispered. "I'm saying she might have used you," Sabine replied, "but not out of malice, out of desperation." I felt sick. Sabine must have read the expression on my face because she softened her tone. "This isn't about blame, this is about survival. And if we're going to protect you, we need to understand the full picture." I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. "What's step 3?" I asked. Sabine didn't answer immediately. She pulled a worn keycard from her wallet and pressed it into my hand. A blank black card with no logo, no name, no hint of who it belonged to. "What's this?" I asked. "A private workspace," she said. "Secure servers. Encrypted systems, no surveillance, no corporate fingerprints, we're going there tonight." "Why?" "Because Stratagem Core moves fast," she said. "And if Douglas sold them anything linked to you, they'll want to secure the source." I shivered. "Meaning me?" "Yes," she said. "We have maybe 12 hours before they make their first move." I felt the weight of the keycard like it was made of iron. "What do you need me to do?" I whispered. Sabine held my gaze with a seriousness that made my stomach drop. "Everything," she said. "I need you to gather your work, your notes, your drafts, every shred of intellectual property you've touched. And then I need you to be willing to weaponize it." My breath caught. "Weaponize it?" "Yes," Sabine said, "because the only way to stop Stratagem Core is to give them something they never expect." "What's that?" And she answered with the one thing I hadn't considered. "The truth," she said, "but told in a way only you can tell it." A strange chill ran down my spine. "Tonight," Sabine said, stepping back, "we build your defense." I nodded, even though fear was crawling under my skin. "And after that?" I asked. Sabine paused at the edge of the garage, looking back at me with a grim, knowing expression. "After that," she said, "we expose Douglas, we expose Stratagem Core, and we make sure they never touch you or anyone else again." But just before she turned away completely, she added, "Assuming, of course, that Vieira doesn't get to you first." I didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Douglas laughing, Sabine warning me, and the shadow of something I hadn't allowed myself to consider. Vieira might not be the mentor I thought she was. By 1 a.m., I had gathered everything. My external drive, printed drafts, notebooks, old email threads, backup files I'd hidden even from myself. All of it stuffed into a backpack that suddenly felt too small for the weight of my life. Sabine texted me an address, 372 Lakeview Industrial Park, BLDG 8, lower level, side entrance. It sounded like the kind of place where secrets went to die. By 1:45 a.m., I was pulling into the empty lot. The building was squat, windowless, and surrounded by metal fencing. A lonely street lamp flickered overhead like it was warning me to go home. Before I could second-guess myself, Sabine stepped out of the shadows. "You came," she said. "You asked." She gave a humorless smile. "Good. We don't have time for hesitation." I followed her inside, through a side door that opened into a long concrete hallway. The air was colder than outside. My footsteps echoed against the walls. At the end of the corridor, Sabine slid the keycard through a reader. A heavy steel door clicked open. Inside was a small workspace, 3 desks, 2 monitors, a server rack, no windows, no personality. A bunker disguised as an office. "This is where we stay off their radar," Sabine said. I dropped my bag onto a desk and pulled out the external drive, but Sabine stopped me before I plugged it in. "Not yet," she whispered. "We're not alone." My heart lurched. "What?" She held up a finger, signaling me to stay still. She crossed the room silently, typed something into a panel near the server rack, and waited. A soft buzz filled the air. Then, click. A hidden door slid open on the far wall. I froze. Because standing behind it, silent, pale, and very much not surprised to see me, was Vieira Wilson. "Hello, Mara," she said softly. My entire body went cold. Sabine swore under her breath. "I told you no more surprises." Vieira ignored her, stepping out into the room with the quiet confidence of someone who didn't fear consequences. "What are you doing here?" I managed. Vieira tilted her head. "Protecting you," Sabine let out a bitter laugh. Is that what you're calling it now? Something electric passed between them, history, resentment, betrayal simmering under the surface. Sabine, Vieira said calmly, you should have told her everything from the start. I told her enough, Sabine snapped. I told her the part that wasn't poisoned. Vieira's eyes flicked to me. She shared the horror story, but she didn't mention the real reason Stratagem Core is hunting. My throat tightened. I don't understand. Vieira stepped closer, her gaze sharp enough to cut through bone. Stratagem Core doesn't want your proposals, Mara, I swallowed. So what do they want? They want you, Vieira said. You're the only one who solved something they've been trying to crack for 15 years. I shook my head. Solved what? I didn't solve anything new, I just built on existing frameworks. No, Vieira interrupted. You saw a pattern in the market, a pattern Sabine and I identified years ago but never finished. Sabine stiffened. Don't drag me into this. The truth is the truth, Vieira said. I stared at them both. What pattern? Vieira hesitated, but only for a second. Then she said it. The algorithm you built isn't just an efficiency model. It mirrors Stratagem Core's internal blueprint, their structure, their entire decision-making logic. Something only people who once worked for them should know. My blood went ice cold. I didn't know that, I whispered. I know, Vieira said. That's why they think I've been feeding you information. Because the only other person who understood that blueprint, she looked at Sabine, was her. Sabine's face drained of color. No, Sabine whispered. You didn't. Vieira's voice softened, almost sad. I didn't tell her. She figured it out herself. That's the problem. The room spun as the realization hit me. The reason Douglas was selling my proposals, the reason Stratagem Core was coming after me, the reason Vieira recruited me, the reason Sabine was terrified, it wasn't because I was talented, or because my work resembled Vieira's, or because someone leaked my ideas. It was because I had somehow recreated the secret architecture of Stratagem Core's operations without ever knowing it existed. I felt the floor tilt. Sabine looked at me, her voice cracking. Mara, your mind is the threat. Vieira stepped closer, placing a steady hand on my shoulder. And now, she said quietly, we have to decide whether to protect you from Stratagem Core, she paused. Or from yourself. For a moment, none of us spoke. The room felt too small, too airless, like the walls were leaning in to hear the answer before I even knew the question. Protect me from myself, I repeated. What the hell is that supposed to mean? Sabine turned away, pressing her palms to the desk like she needed something solid to hold onto. Vieira, on the other hand, looked perfectly composed, the same calm, unreadable stillness that had impressed me for months. Only now it didn't feel reassuring. It felt strategic. Start talking, I said. I'm done being the only one in the dark. Vieira exhaled slowly, the kind of breath people take before they decide whether or not to hurt someone with the truth. Then she stepped closer. Mara, she said softly, Stratagem Core built its empire on a predictive model that could manipulate entire markets before those markets even understood the shift. It was a weapon disguised as analytics. I didn't blink. I couldn't. They used it to profit from bankruptcies before they happened, to buy up distressed companies they helped destabilize, to push emerging industries into collapse so they could swoop in as saviors. Her voice never wavered. Every innovation they sold was tied to someone else's downfall. A cold, sharp nausea rolled through me. And you were part of that, I whispered. Her jaw tightened, not in guilt, in calculation. I believed I could steer them toward something less destructive. They convinced me they wanted change. But when I realized they were only evolving their tactics, not abandoning them, I left. You didn't leave, Sabine said bitterly. They cut you loose when you refused to build the next phase. Vieira's silence was confirmation enough. Fine, I snapped. What does any of that have to do with me? Sabine turned toward me, her face pale. Because your models, the ones Douglas buried, they aren't just clever, they aren't just efficient. They replicate Stratagem Core's signature architecture. Code for code, flow for flow, she swallowed. You recreated their blueprint by instinct. You don't understand how impossible that is. I shook my head. I didn't recreate anything on purpose. That's the problem, Sabine said. You're doing it naturally, without exposure, without training, without access to the confidential materials only insiders ever saw. Vieira's eyes softened, but her voice stayed clinical. You think in structures they spent 15 years perfecting. You recognized patterns only their most senior architects ever handled. You built an optimized version of their system, one even they couldn't produce, simply because you saw where their logic was flawed. My hands went numb. So what? I said weakly. I accidentally built something similar. That doesn't make me a threat. Sabine's expression hardened. No, the threat is that Stratagem Core cannot afford to let anyone exist who can dissect or rebuild their machinery without consent. Her voice dropped to a whisper. They don't see you as a genius. They see you as a leak they didn't create. The dread in my chest deepened. And Douglas? I asked. Why was he selling my work? Vieira answered this time, and her tone shifted into something icy enough to make my shoulders tense. Because Douglas isn't ambitious, she said. He's frightened. She paused. Stratagem Core recruited him 5 years ago, but he never earned their trust. He was insignificant, replaceable. He wanted to give them something that would elevate his status. Her eyes locked onto mine. He wanted you. My stomach twisted violently. No, he didn't even like me. A slow, merciless smile touched Vieira's lips, nothing warm about it. He didn't have to like you, she said. He just had to own you. And by stealing your work, burying your proposals, and controlling your access to higher roles, he believed he could trap you long enough to deliver you to Stratagem Core as his greatest asset. The air left my lungs. Douglas tried to sell me. Vieira didn't blink. Yes, but only because of one thing. Her voice dropped, dark and sharp. You think he rejected your proposals because he didn't understand them. But the truth is much colder. She stepped closer until her eyes were level with mine. Douglas suppressed your work because the moment it reached executive review, everyone would have realized the truth he could never survive. Her words landed like a blade. You were better than him, better than all of them, and he needed you small enough to weaponize. The room spun. My pulse roared in my ears. I felt sick, physically ill with the weight of it. I looked between them, my voice barely holding together. So what now? What do we do? Sabine answered first. Now, she said. Now we make sure the last thing Douglas ever hears is the truth he tried to bury. And a darker edge entered her voice. And then we deal with Stratagem Core. The plan came together in pieces, ugly, sharp pieces that only fit when I finally accepted the truth. Douglas hadn't underestimated me. He hadn't dismissed me. He hadn't ignored me. He had feared me, and fear makes people reckless. By dawn, Sabine and Vieira had sifted through every draft, timestamp, metadata trail, and suppressed proposal I'd ever created. The evidence wasn't just damning, it was irrefutable. Douglas hadn't just buried my work, he'd altered it, cut out sections, removed origin authorship, manipulated timestamps, forwarded fragments to Stratagem Core while keeping the full models offline so he could claim I was uncooperative if they demanded more. He wasn't trying to destroy me. He was trying to trade me. Once I understood that, revenge stopped being emotional. It became surgical. At 8:13 a.m., Sabine hit send on the first part of our plan. An anonymous file dropped to Redline's board, all internal proposal versions, including Douglas's edits exposing every theft, every delayed submission, every falsified timestamp. No accusations, just truth. At 8:19, Vieira sent the second part, a legal notice from her personal attorneys, addressed to Stratagem Core and carbon-copied to Redline's compliance division, stating that any attempts to contact me would be treated as intellectual property interference. At 8:24, I sent my part. A single, simple email. Subject, regarding recent misrepresentations to Redline Systems Executive Board CC, HR Compliance Ethics Oversight Body. Attached is a complete digital record of the proposal lineage from the past 3 years. All drafts, authorship chains, and time-stamped edits included. Please review pages 1227 regarding Douglas Reddington's alterations. Respectfully, Mara Rowan Sabine stared at me. You're calm. I'm done being afraid, I said, and it was true. The fear had burned itself out. What was left was clarity. Douglas didn't last 3 hours. By noon, the board demanded he appear for an emergency meeting. He didn't know yet that all his emails, Slack messages, and metadata logs were already in the compliance team's hands. By 12:42 p.m., an internal notice announced he'd been suspended pending investigation. By 1:10 p.m., security escorted him out of the building in full view of the floor he used to terrorize. I didn't go to see it, I didn't need to. Morgan, my old desk mate, sent me a photo anyway. Douglas's face looked gray, hollow, crushed under his own arrogance. He texted me once. "You did this." And I replied, "No, you did." But the part that mattered, the part that settled something inside me, came later. 2 weeks after Douglas fell, Redline Systems formally partnered with Vieira's new venture in a tightly regulated pilot program that required transparent authorship documentation on all innovations. Guess who signed the contract on Redline's behalf? Me. I walked into the boardroom wearing the same confidence Douglas had always tried to beat out of me. The same confidence I'd once swallowed to survive. "Miss Rowan," Board Chair Wu said, rising to shake my hand, "we owe you an apology and a thank you." I nodded. "Then let's build something better than what he left behind." There was no triumph in my voice, just truth. That night, standing alone outside the new headquarters overlooking the lake, Sabine joined me. She didn't say anything at first. Then, "You changed everything," she said. I shook my head. "No, Douglas did. Stratagem Corps did. I just stopped letting them decide who I had to be." Her expression softened, a rare thing. "Don't underestimate what you survived." I looked out at the dark water, breathing in the cold air, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. "I'm not surviving anymore," I said. "I'm building." Sabine smiled, and for the first time I believed her. I wasn't running. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't nothing without the company. I was the one who rebuilt the game. And people like Douglas, they weren't even players anymore.